and we are so grateful. I don't think I need to give you the background of this Homo sapien who is sentient and expressive and joyous and a newlywed. And so his smile is infectious, and we are going to be the wonderful recipients of our very own Reverend Brian Walker.
How about this? All right. Thank you. So the theme for the month is play. And the title of my talk is Homo Ludens, which I'm guessing probably not too many of you have heard of. You know, Reverend Wayne just used the term Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens is the name of our species. Homo man, wise man, or person in today's lingo, right? So a wise person. So Homo Ludens is, you know, there are different kind of adjectives that can be added to homo, like homo economicus, you know, kind of economical man. So there are different ways that you can look at the human being. And so Homo Ludens is man as player, or human as player, or the playing human. Okay, and so so there's a whole theme, and in fact, somebody who's well known wrote a book with the title Homo Ludens. And so anyway, so I, as I want to do, I like to do some research on these things before I get up and speak to you. You know, I have some things that happen, of course, in my heart, and that's very important to share, but I also like to explore these things. And one of the things that I was interested to discover, that play, like other kind of activities, human activities like art and religion, actually is not so easy to define. So if you look in your dictionary, it'll say, engage in activity for enjoyment and recreation rather than a serious or practical purpose. All right, so it's something that you're doing for enjoyment, not practical, not serious. That's kind of the baseline definition. And when we think about play, we commonly think of children. And so this is kind of the image that I think that a child might have of play. It would look something like this. That is play. Now, unfortunately, a lot of modern parents think about play more like this. It's funny, but maybe too true to want to consider. Anyway, because in our country, that we pride ourselves on being productive, on being efficient, on getting things done. And so when you look at play as something that is, you know, frivolous, extraneous, you know, unproductive, God knows, it's not surprising that within the last, you know, 2 or 3 decades, there's been a movement in educational, in elementary education to cut down on the time outside and focus more on academics, on the things that we know to be more productive and that we really value the most. In fact, even the idea of calling it recess is that, oh, we're taking a break from the stuff that really matters. And is that really the case? Well, there's been a lot of research since this movement has started to show that it's not. It's not. And that that this whole idea about when kids go out to the playground is that the learning stops. In fact, the director of of the Center for Developing Child at Harvard University says that play is not an alternative to learning. It's not a distraction from school, but it's an important component of it. And that there are plenty of benefits, physical, mental, social, emotional, all kinds of benefits. And he claims play is one of the most important ways in which children learn. Play is one of the most important ways in which children learn. That gets your attention, huh? Anyway, again, in my explorations, one of the things that I discovered is that there is a journal about play. Not surprisingly, it's called the American Journal of Play. But there's been a movement or an awareness that in the last several decades, that in the United States and in other developed countries, that children's free playtime has been decreasing markedly. I know this is true for my grandkids and my granddaughter and my daughter and my son-in-law. I think are great parents and doing a great job. But I think for a variety of reasons, one of which is, there's a whole concern about safety in today's world. And I think this have you heard this term helicopter parenting? I think that's become fairly common as well. But anyway, so the data shows that kids have significantly less free playtime, particularly outside. And so research has shown that over this same period of time, that anxiety, depression, suicide, narcissism have increased sharply in kids, adolescents, and young adults. And there's a theory that, although it's complicated, that this outside playtime, that this free playtime, that kids that's diminishing, has a significant correlation with this. And so it's really, really important that we value play, not only for kids, but for ourselves. So here's the list of things that research has shown that benefits children from playing outside. Develop intrinsic interests and competencies. So you get in touch with what you really like, and you do things and you find out, I can do this stuff. Learn how to make decisions, solve problems, exert self-control, and follow rules. So there are people who write about the challenge that we are having as a country in terms of the polarization and the difficulty that we're having getting along and making this democracy work, that kids don't learn this stuff because they don't go out and play as much anymore. And so they don't learn the rules of the playground, which is part of how you figure out, how you're going to get along and how you're going to solve problems, how you're going to either do whatever you're going to do with the rules. Learn to regulate their emotions so that again, we have situations when we're playing where we get emotional. How are you going to learn to regulate that? Well, when you're with a group of kids and you're having that interaction, that's one of the ways. Make friends and learn to get along with others as equals. Very important that we're making friends out there and we're learning how to cope and how to relate to one another. And the last thing is, very, very important, experience joy. Experience joy. So I want to shift a little bit and focus on play in a broader kind of context. So we might say it in a spiritual kind of context, because play has been a part of all of the wisdom traditions. In the Gospels, Jesus says, unless you become like little children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. So what's he talking about? The way that I interpret that, it's to be in that spontaneous, creative, joy-filled place that play is all a part of. And to be able to be present to who you are right now and whatever's happening. Breathe with me. Yeah. So St. Paul in one of his letters claims that he's a fool for Christ. A fool for Christ. Jews honor the Sabbath. It's a day when you do go out to recess and you make a point of really celebrating and engaging in the pleasure of life. It's the day on which they traditionally make love. So it's really opening to the spirit inside of you and what that brings out. Hindus say that the universe was created as lila, which is play. So the universe itself is God in divine play. And so we're all a part of that. Muslim Sufis teach a lot of their lessons through Mullah Nasruddin, who is this jokester and this laughable sage who's a fool and has all these lessons to teach us in life. And Zen Buddhist teachers poke fun at dogma, and Native Americans have their different trickster figures, again, who are teachers, especially one of them that's very common is Coyote or Coyote, who's very clever and very bright and breaks all the rules and yet teaches you all of things about life that are very valuable. So in this way of looking at play is giving and receiving love. Giving and receiving love. I love that idea of play because that really covers a lot of territory. So let me tell you a little story. So once upon a time, there's a little boy who'd been going to church, ever since he'd been alive. And he always was hearing about God. And he'd heard about God for so long that he decided that he was going to go out and find God for himself. So he thought the journey might be long. So he found one of his father's old gym bags and he loaded it up with root beer and granola bars and Oreos. And then he set off, without telling his mother where he was going. So this young fellow is about 6 years old, and he hadn't gone very far when he got a little tired and decided to take a rest. And so there was a park right there, so he cut across the grass and over to a bench. And there, sitting on the bench, was an old woman. And so he climbed up beside her, and the two of them sat there for quite some time without saying anything. And then he turned to her and he asked her if she was thirsty. And she nodded and gave a nice, great big smile. And so they started drinking the root beer. So they're drinking the root beer and they shared and they sat in silence and did that. And about that time, the little boy thought, that it's time to have something to eat. And so they started eating the granola bars and the Oreos and drinking some more of the root beer. And and she's very grateful for this and is smiling back at him and not saying anything. And so they were together for about an hour and she's silent the whole time. And so he's just talking and he's telling her about his parents and about his brothers and sisters and about being in first grade and about his pets and just telling her about everything. And she's just kind of, just there and smiling at him and just enjoying his company. And so the time passes and he thought of his mother and home and he thought, she's probably going to be upset with me because I didn't tell her where I was going. And so he decides he better go home. And so he picks up the bag and they'd finished off everything. And so he put the remains in the bag and he started to take off and he said goodbye to the old woman and he got a short ways away and he thought, how much he enjoyed her smile. And so he ran back and jumped up on the bench and gave her a hug and a kiss. And she just beamed her that big smile at him. And so he took off and he went home. And when he got there, his mother was waiting for him at the door, frantic, and said, grab him and shook him and said, "Where were you? I never want you to go off like that without telling me. Where have you been?" And he looked at her and he smiled and he said, I spent the afternoon in the park with God. And so the mother is stunned. And then he adds kind of thoughtfully, I never thought she'd be so old and so quiet and so thirsty. Meanwhile, the old woman had gotten her cane and was walking home. And she got home, and her son, who was waiting for her then, said, "Mom, where have you been? I've been worried sick about you. Don't go off without telling me where you're going." And so her face was radiant, and so she's smiling, and she says, "Oh, you didn't have to worry. I was in the park with God." And so the son is thinking, "Oh, God, she's really flipped out more than ever now." And so kind of thoughtfully, she adds, "I didn't expect him to be so young and so talkative and to love root beer." So that to me is a good example of play as giving and receiving love. Because at the heart of play is love. And it's a sense of wonder and mutual discovery, of finding out more about the world, more about ourselves, more about the people that we interact with. So I want to share with you my own journey with play. Unlike today's kids, I did spend a lot of time outdoors, playing with, the kids from the neighborhood, playing kick the can, playing tag, playing freeze tag, playing capture the flag, playing Red Rover. You know all the games, right? I'm sure you can add some more. And we learned all of those things that I enumerated before, how to get along with each other and how to figure out how the rules are, and and how to figure out when somebody gets upset, how do you manage that? And it's really, really important stuff. So growing up, basketball is my passion, so I played a lot of basketball. I love playing basketball, very, very important to me. Then when I got a little older, I played chess. I liked playing chess, and that was a passion for mine for a long time. But as an adult, I probably got more out of touch with play that maybe some of you have experienced as well. Anyway, in fact, when I retired from Unity in Santa Maria, which was in 2016, one of the things that I decided, and at that time I moved up to San Luis Obispo, one of the things that I decided was that I was going to play. And I dedicated myself to playing more. And that showed up as dance. Because, all my life I've wanted to dance, but, kind of felt a little bit too inhibited. And so I found a dance group in San Luis Obispo. Now, the first group I found was a bunch of college kids. Anyway, that's probably not the best fit, but then I found some more folks, some adults in ballroom dancing. Anyway, but so that was a lot of fun. But so some of the ways that I like to play is, I'm a big Seinfeld fan. And I haven't shared this with anybody, but actually, before Kathy and I got married, there was a prenuptial agreement that she needed to watch Seinfeld reruns if we were going to be able to make it as a couple. Because we were watching one the other night, and I was laughing so hard that my stomach hurt, and I couldn't stop laughing, and I couldn't catch my breath. And so one of the things that Kathy really appreciates is she may not love all the humor in Seinfeld, but she loves watching me watch it. And so that is very, very entertaining for her. So it's actually worked out fairly well. I'm a big Peanuts fan, and I think you probably see that in some of the stuff that I share, the images, and in the newsletter and that sort of thing. I like Snoopy. Snoopy's kind of an inspiration for me. And now, of course, a lot of you have heard about my little Poochie, my little puppy dog, our puppy dog, and playing with him is really, really a lot of fun. We just really have a good time together, and so that's a lot of fun. So the other thing that always throughout my life has been a way that I play is with humor, and I like to tell a story and cartoons. I told somebody that I have a cartoon ministry. But paradoxically, like play itself, remember I started off saying play is not serious. At least that's the way that we think about it. But it is. If we think that, the way kids learn, play is one of the most important ways that they learn, it paradoxically is actually very serious. And so recess is not a break from what's going on, but actually a really important time in which we're spending time together and doing something really important. So the cartoons sometimes are, sometimes they're just kind of lighthearted and plays on words and that sort of thing. But other times they have an important message. And so I don't want you to miss those. So I thought I'd share some with you here. So if I knew the meaning of life, would I be sitting in a cave in my underpants? So to me, this is important because it gets really to the heart of what we're doing here, having this human experience, and that is to remember who we are. And of course, we have different ways of finding that out. We might go to somebody sitting in a cave in their underpants, but ultimately it really comes from our own experience with our divine selves, our Christ conscious, our Buddha nature. That's the most important thing. And so we can get guidance from other kind of sources, but that's it. So this is another one that's really important, is to be able to distinguish between the ideas that we have that are really generated from our ego or that really come from our heart's desire and that really higher self. So this is something that we're always constantly practicing doing, right? Is to make that distinction. Very important. So this is, I think this really captures something that's very important for us in New Thought, and that is, Eric Butterworth had a phrase that he used that a lot of spiritual seekers were overbooked and under-practiced. And I think this really captures the heart of that, because we think if we keep learning more stuff, that's gonna lead us to enlightenment and nirvana. Well, making that effort to do the practice is really important. So this is another one that, going to church on Sunday doesn't do anything magic for you. It's great. It's great to have a spiritual community, and there are many, many benefits. And as far as I'm concerned, it's essential for me in my life and my spiritual growth. But the energy and the knowledge and all of the inspiration you get, you need to take that and apply it the rest of the week and all of the rest of your life. So it's, if you see that the actual results may vary, it's because people are doing it differently. And some folks really are putting some effort into it, and others, not so much. So to me, this one's really important too, because I think we think that if we sit down on the cushion or whatever our spiritual practice is, we pray or whatever, that, we want fireworks and we want, God to speak to us and to have that experience. And sometimes that may happen, and that's wonderful. But for me, it's more about, transforming my life's experience. And even though I can have some really wonderful experiences when I sit on the cushion or pray or whatever I do, It's about changing my life's experience, so how I relate to myself and relate to other people and see the world and understand how the world works differently than I have in the past. And that it's constantly getting better. Life is good. This is all too true, friends. That our materialistic culture is willing to lead lives where we are consuming the planet's resources, and pretty soon we'll be sitting around a fire thinking about those old days. Anyway, so I think it's really important that we realize how we live our lives really matters, and it makes a difference. I think, particularly we in this country and other developed countries, we have we might be over-consuming. So anyway. So what's play? Play is activity. It's as the dictionary says, enjoyment and recreation. It's not serious or practical, but that's not what we have come to believe. It's so much more than that. It's essential for your soul's journey. Your soul is yearning for you to play, so don't miss it. Play is the spontaneous, creative, joyful expression of who you are. Don't underplay it. It's really, really important. And I think it's especially important at this time in our human and planetary evolution that we be aware of how important play is. And the reason that I say that, when you see what's going on in the world, it's easy to get upset, to get angry, to get overwhelmed. And when you do, that only feeds into the chaos and all the apparent chaos that we see out there. But in the face of the horrors, and I mean horrors, that are going on and that you see on the news at night, reading the paper, that are visited upon our world daily, choosing to play and let there be joy is a revolutionary action. It's revolutionary because you're making a statement that you're not going to be overwhelmed by the world, because joy is the undeniable presence of God. So friends, play and be joyful. God bless you.